I'm Andrew Patterson from interest.co.nz. Welcome to another in our Business Success series. With me today, the Chief Executive of DDB, Justin Mowday. Hi, Justin.
Hey, how you doing?
Well, Justin, you're a very established agency. You've been around a long time. Tell us a bit about the nature of the business, the nature of the agency model, and perhaps particularly a little bit about your customer engagement process.
Sure. Look, I think the advertising model has been around since our founder, Bill Bernbach, sort of pioneered this model in about the 50s, early 60s. So he's the B in DDB. He's the guy that Mad Men and all those shows has written about. And I think he was the first one to develop the agency model to have experts in different fields all coming together collaboratively around a client's problem. And that's pretty much the fundamentals that an ad agency works on today. I think one of the big changes we've seen of late, and particularly driven by technology, social media, and various other areas like data, is we're seeing more specialisation in different areas, but more requirement for them to come together as one group around a client's business, and that's quite a shift. DDB in particular, we believe in having best in breed parts to our group offering that clients can choose to have a piece of, or they can choose to have in totality. And I think, naturally we believe that when it comes together in totality, that's when it has its maximum power. An example of recent innovation from us is we've just launched Dynamo, which is a new part of our group offering. And for the first time, that puts data analysts, data scientists, CRM planners, so direct marketing people, alongside traditional media planners, all in the one spot, all in the one room, working together. And whilst that seems fairly simple, in actual fact, to give a client a cohesive program from the direct marketing I might receive right through to the above the line message, and then having analytics around that measure ROI to the nth degree, is really interesting. And I think one of the transitions we've seen over the last 10 years is a move away from sort of gut instinct, and I think that works, to some real fact-based decisions about what works and what doesn't. With that model, with Dynamo, we can now look at a campaign that we used to do in a direct marketing sense and make the call to say, actually, it would be more efficient. We know from the data and the response levels we can get to actually take that above the line and do that on TV, and vice versa. We can look at something that would have been in mass media and outdoor, and maybe even in digital, and go, actually, we can get a much better return by taking that below the line and driving it direct to consumers.
Fair to say, though, that the agency model has probably never been more under pressure. The waves of sort of creative disruption are sweeping through, and businesses, of course, have a multitude of platforms that they can do things for themselves. How are you adapting to those winds of change?
Embracing them. I think history is littered with examples where pressure and change has brought about some really interesting innovation, and I think that's exactly what's happening in the advertising industry right now. We have had to fundamentally reassess some of the ways we work, some of the principles that we adhere to, in this exciting new era. I mean, we suddenly have the opportunity not only to talk at people, one-way communication, but now to do that, and do that really well, and that still has a really important role, but now to add to that with two-way engagement, where we can get a much deeper impression of a brand or a client's business with that consumer, and to get them to respond, and then take that a step further, not only respond, but potentially then shape the marketing from the consumer, and actually co-create some activity that may happen between a brand and the consumer. And that's an amazing step forward. I mean, I think marketing is at its most powerful when we move to those sorts of phases. We challenge ourselves internally by saying we have to create content or a piece of engagement with a consumer so powerful that they want to play with it, participate with it, or pass it on. Now, that can still be a television commercial, the Westpac Fladdies ad we've done, or Lotto Wilson. People pass that on. It's so compelling as content. They'll stop their My Sky box, fast forwarding to watch that bit of content, and they'll share it with other people. Or it can be other bits of content, like we've done for Crafty Beggars, the new Lion Bear brand, where people can participate with it. They can actually have a say in it. They can actually give us feedback on which one they liked. And based on that, we might make that beer for them. So I think that's where I think we're getting a step change effect from consumers from a marketing point of view.
Social media has transformed the landscape, as you've mentioned. How are companies, do you think, embracing that opportunity and the speed at which it's actually changing?
Look, in all honesty, to varying degrees of success is how they're embracing it. I think, unfortunately, some brands have leapt into that space and treat it as a free channel to put promotional messages at people. And I think that's really harming the opportunity of what that can be. We need to remember that people go into social media not to see brand messages or ads or to see price promos. They go into social media to connect with other people.
So in your experience, how do you think social media should be integrated into a campaign appropriately?
You have to find a really relevant way to have a role there. You have to understand the consumer, understand their motivations to be there, and think about how can my brand play a valuable role. A good example, for Lindale last year, we did a campaign around the Girls' Night Out. And of course, Facebook has a great functionality where it allows you to set up events. So Lindale could play a really valid role at making it easy for women to get together with other women to have a girls' night out using the event function. So find a relevant way to have a presence there. Don't just pop up and slam your message at people. I think social media is one of the areas in the digital landscape that we're still figuring out as an industry. We're past the true experimentation sort of phase that was 2 years ago, and so we've learned some principles as an industry. We know some things that work and don't work, but the great thing about the whole digital space is there's constant innovation. There's always new things you can do. So I think the modern form of an ad agency and indeed marketing is embracing some experimentation. I know some of our clients have actually put aside some money out of their marketing budget to go, I want to do those traditional things because I know what the ROI will be on those. I want to do some of these new things here because I want that deeper engagement that we talked about, that two-way engagement, and I'm going to put a small portion over here to try something this year, just to give something a go that I've never done before. And that's, I think it's been a number of years since clients have actually purposefully gone, I'm going to try some, I really want to try some of this stuff.
Yeah. Talking about disruptive forces, probably the most obvious one at the moment is Gen Y, which we know have been particularly challenging, both as a generation but also as employees. So how do you manage them within an agency environment when they come full of creative ideas and you drop them into a very creative environment? How do those two marry up?
Look, I think there's two parts to the Gen Y. There's as an employee for us, within our company, and then there's as an audience. And as you said, I think as an employee, we have reevaluated how we mentor and harness, I guess, their talents. It is difficult. They have expectations beyond any workforce before them. They want to move ahead, be faster than the generations before them, we find, and they have less patience potentially and tolerance for that not happening. So that's forced us to really think about how we mentor them. I think one of the things we do is really detailed development plans. So we've found with Gen Y, if they know where they're going and approximately what time frame they might get there, actually it actually works pretty well. And I think a lack of clarity around that does not work well with Gen Y at all. And I think they get frustrated with, well, what's next? That sort of impatience I talked about. I think the other thing for us is, in this culture, we embrace ideas from anywhere. In fact, just putting Gen Y aside for a second, that even goes, very much to a much more collaborative relationship with clients these days. I think a decade ago, 15 years ago, when I worked at Saatchi's and started out, it was the client gave you a brief, we burrowed away in a room for 6 weeks and we showed you the answer, as the client. Now, we're in the room together, we're around the table, we're having interim sessions, tissue sessions. I mention that because in a Gen Y sense, that actually gives them a lot of opportunity to input. It gives them, within our framework, a lot of opportunity for their ideas to be heard. And they start to learn why some are right and some are wrong, why some fit with the strategy and why some don't themselves during that process. So we actively, don't get me wrong, there's a hierarchy in an agency to some degree. We try and flatten that out and have Gen Y involved in some of those meetings so they're involved at that level.
So taking those those learnings, how do you apply all of that knowledge as customers when you're actually recommending to clients as to how to market to them?
Yeah, so that's as tricky and different, I think, in some ways. One of the things we've found with Gen Y is, and this is, I think, encouraging for society, full stop, encouraging for our business, encouraging for the country. They have a much bigger social awareness and appreciation in the way that they want to live in the world and the way they want to be seen. And so I think if we go back to that conversation we were having before about two-way communications, about involving people in the communications versus sort of talking at people, we've certainly found with Gen Y they appreciate a two-way conversation. That's not to say you can't do some of the more traditional advertising. That still works. It grows awareness. It gets you scale. But that depth of involvement, and if they feel, again, they can have a say and contribute to the brand or be a part of the marketing in some way, that certainly works really well. I think the other thing for me is you can't beat great storytelling in terms of engaging people. The same, even in the new world of advertising and marketing, the same principles apply. I need to get your attention in some way. I need to reward you with a piece of entertainment or usefulness that is compelling enough that you will listen to my message and remember it, and then act on it. Nothing's changed. That's what Bill Bernbach did in 1961 with Volkswagen, and it's what we're doing today. Same principles. We just have way more opportunity to do that with people. So with Gen Y, we need to get their attention. We then need to engage them with something that's really relevant. And we talk a lot about rewarding consumers. Harvey Norman do not reward consumers. They yell at you. We want to reward consumers with a piece of content, that's compelling enough that you want to watch it, that your mind is open to the message and you remember it and act on it. And Gen Y, if anything, are just more demanding on that scale.
Let's talk a bit about research, because insights is a challenging part for many businesses, and the question marks around the relevance of research, market research today. Somebody like Steve Jobs, who said that consumers don't know what they want until you put it in front of them. What's the role of research these days, and is that potentially a dying industry over time?
No, definitely not. It's the type of research. That's a massive broad field when we talk about research. We thrive on insight, and in fact, we won't start a creative process until we have insight, until we have knowledge and insight. So I think research has a ongoing critical role at understanding, particularly in our world, consumers, their motivations, their behaviours, and therefore uncovering an insight that we can use. As an example, we did a campaign for the sort of 50 plus generation for Westpac recently called Handout, and the insight, it's called the sandwich generation. I'm sure it's been talked about in many fields, where you get to your 50s and you should be enjoying the fruits of your labours at that point and kicking back and relaxing, but in fact you're probably looking after your parents to some degree, financially supporting them, and you're shelling out to the kids still at that point, and actually there's nothing left for me. That was an insight into that audience that led to a piece of creative that's sort of renowned and working incredibly hard for the bank, and we got that from research. And I think therefore it plays a really critical role there. Where it doesn't play a role, and I completely agree with Steve Jobs, is human beings can only react and give you feedback on what they know and what they're familiar with. And I think in communications and marketing, part of our role is to do things with people that they haven't seen before. Not for the sake of it, but because the fresh and the new engages and makes a bigger impression than the familiar and the old. It's just human nature. So if we're about showing things to people they haven't seen before in a new way, in order to get a brand engagement and an effect in sales for our client, then pre-researching that idea is never going to go well, because it's new and different, and people just, again, human beings don't react well to change, so that's not going to work. Now, will it work as a piece of communication and a marketing campaign? Absolutely. Will it get through research? Probably not. So our view very much is use research and use it a lot up front, understand the landscape, understand competitors, understand the consumer audience, understand their motivations, behaviours, all that sort of stuff. But there comes a point where we should learn so much from that as marketers and advertisers. We don't need research down the back end to double check it. I mean, we should know enough at that point about the audience and what we have to do and about our business to make the call, and intuitively, trust our instincts and our knowledge that we've gained to make that call, to do something quite demonstrable in the market with a campaign.
Agencies have always been well known for paying close attention to business trends. We've spoken about social media and others, but what's the trend that you're paying most attention to right now, and the one that you think businesses should be thinking seriously about for the future?
Big question. Look, it's hard to go past in our game the trend in around digital engagement from people, and in particular, handsets and on-the-go devices. So it's something. If I mentioned, social was sort of being experimented with 5 years ago, I think we're still experimenting with how brands and marketing can have a role on handsets, on mobile devices, on tablets that's really relevant and useful and not just interruptive and annoying. And so I think that's one sort of trend that's pretty big for us. I think the other one, and it's possibly a sign of the economic times, is one of the biggest challenges we find facing many businesses out there is how you can move from short-term sales-driving tactics back into building some value in brands, and ultimately getting some more margin in the sale, around some products. So we've been through a period where I think many businesses, potentially quite rightly during the recession or GFC, went to some short-term tactics, a lot of discounting, a lot of sales, a lot of, that sort of behaviour. That's unsustainable. In actual fact, we've done an incredible job at training consumers to spot what's a real sale and what isn't. The problem with that is there's no margin in a sale, and I'm not just talking retail, it's beyond just the core retail category to sales full stop. And so I think there's a job to re-educate consumers out of that mentality. There's a job to build brands again where, someone's prepared to pay 99 cents instead of 55 cents for a product or a good, because they like that brand, because they have an affinity with it, because they value it in some way. I think that's a global. Certainly in the Western markets, we're seeing it as a global challenge. I mean, it's certainly one that's really live here in New Zealand now.
And that's all about the customer engagement process, isn't it? Because brand customers want to be engaged with brands, and they form a view now about brands pretty quickly.
Very quickly, and more judgmental than ever before as well. That's a really strong trend that's happening. Obviously, digital social media, everything allows that to happen a lot quicker. You put one step wrong, and it's broadcast everywhere. In fact, I read an article the other day saying it's never been a scarier time to be a brand marketer, because you do muck it up, and that's a real issue. I think for service brands, that's really hard to get a large service organisation to deliver a consistently excellent standard all the time. Every interaction is near impossible. So there's some challenge around that. I think people are more judgmental, but they can be more supportive and more passionate and more vocal at the same time.
Yes, because you can have them as advocates as well.
Yeah, and so that's obviously the flip side, and the nirvana that we try and drive for our clients, to enroll people in a meaningful way where they take on the message. I mentioned before that mantra we have of content or an idea so compelling that people want to participate with it, play with it, or pass it on. If you can get 100 people doing that, or 1,000 people doing that, in a positive sense, it's pretty powerful. Bill Bernbach coined in, I think, 1961 that word of mouth is the most powerful medium of all, and it is today. Nothing's changed.
Yeah, that part of the equation remains. Yeah. Just finally, the future for agencies and the model. When we're having this conversation in another 10 or 20 years' time, will we still be sitting here in an advertising agency?
There'll be an agency of some form. I think advertising as a word has become a euphemism for a much bigger sort of landscape than just ads. But look, it's exciting. It's really exciting. It's personally for me, here at DDB, there's never been a better time to sort of be influential across the agency. This is a new era of two-way communication and engagement. It is a new opportunity for brands. We are still figuring some stuff out, and we are able to create bigger results for our clients. I think we've always had mantra to create exponential results. Sometimes there's an idea that's just so compelling with consumers. No matter what you forecast and thought you might do, it just works better. Westpac Flatties, I mentioned Lotto Wilson the dog, the Steinlager white can, a can sold to every New Zealander, at that time. As much as we hoped we had something amazing on our hands, you never know until you put it in the market, and we did, and that doesn't change in the future for agencies. There is something that we do here, an environment we create, a set of people that we recruit, a creative pool that's vast, a creative department of 50 people here who think about problems in a different way to what our clients do. That's why they come to us. And I think that will always be a need for businesses. I think they will always have a requirement to tap into that creative talent pool to solve their business problems in a unique way. Heaps of different ways to do it now, lots of different channels, lots of different opportunities, but I don't think the core need changes at all.